What are your funniest D&D stories?
Wingardium Leviosa.
My player played a scion, who had a spell which made his eyes light up like cars' headlights. He walked around a dark dungeon along with his group, killing everything in sight. While in the area where he knew there would be a boss nearby, he silently walked up to a door, and looked through its keyhole while his eyes were still on. The monster boss saw the light coming through the keyhole, and broke down the door, which hit the scion's head and knocked him out.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Story a friend told me. He had never played before, and was invited by one of our mutual friends to a D&D night. Of course, being a brand new character, he didn't really get to do a lot of fighting. They mostly just had him carry stuff. One of the things they gave him was a teleportation stone. The way it worked is that they would set an anchor point in a village or home base, and then the stone could be used to open a portal to that spot for quick escapes. He decided to see what would happen if he threw it into the ocean. Ended up displacing the whole ocean, and flooded the world. Game over.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I had a friend who consistently used to play a priest. He'd find an elephant, or a camel, something large, to use as a mount. Ride it to death. Cut the meat away for rations and animate the carcass. As soon as he could afford to, he'd commission plateboarding for the skeletal animal, pad the interior of the ribcage with mattresses and ride from inside it. Basically make himself the D&D equivalent of a tank, APC. Every damned time.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I think the tale of Sir Barrington needs to be mentioned here. Also shoutouts to. One of my all-time favorite character backgrounds was from that site. He was a druid who lived on a small island. One night he drunkenly swore a blood oath to a traveler, but when he woke up in the morning he forgot what it was for and the traveler was gone. So he's traveling the land to try to figure out what he promised to do before failing to do it killed him. The rest of our party was great also. We had a wizard who didn't believe in magic and saw it as proof that the world wasn't real. We had a monk who was a master of drunken boxing, which for our DM meant that the more drunk the player was, rolls were adjusted up accordingly. This was college, so needless to say we all weren't exactly sober during this. And finally we had a priest who got into it.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Because he stole a Bible to sell for food and people offering to pay him to preach on the streets, and at this point he's just so far in over his head he's rolling with it. Edit also, Kingdom Hearts is the best D&D game ever.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I was climbing a cliff face that was roughly 250 feet up while a dragon landed in front of the rest of the party right in front of the ladder that was used to get up the cliff, so I set down the item we were getting from said dragon's horde, pulled out 2 javelins and jumped from the top of the cliff. The dragon was almost dead, so all I had to do was land on it. Well, as I was falling, the dragon decided that it was going to take off. It raised its head and opened its wings just as I was landing on it, and I killed the dragon. The only bad thing about this is the fact that it was 250 feet of free fall. I killed the dragon on impact and hit its skull so hard that it immediately killed me. My party made it out of the caves with my body, but they couldn't revive me. The only person besides myself that could revive me rolled a natural 1 3 times in a row, and I couldn't roll anything higher than a 5, so in
Wingardium Leviosa.
the end I died, but I also killed a dragon as my last act.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Skeletons she hit. She could hit multiple skeletons, and it'd probably kill a bunch of them. And then, she did it. She actually did it. Flew up to 100 feet. Shouted cowabunga. Jumped off, curled into a ball, and went rolling through the skeletons like a cannonball. Now, whenever they're facing difficult odds, the barbarian's first suggestion is, "Hey, paladin, remember when you went bowling for skeletons?" The things the barbarian gets the paladin to do. I was DMing the party, my wife was playing a paladin with a hippogriff for her mount, and our friend was a barbarian. The party had accidentally stirred up the undead around an orc village, they'd been forced to retreat into a box canyon, and the entrance to the canyon was completely blocked by hundreds of skeletons. Unfortunately, nobody had brought any blunt weapons, so all their attacks were suffering damage reduction, and it was taking forever for them to do any real damage to the skeletons. The barbarian had a quick chat with the paladin. His suggestion was that she should get on her hippogriff, fly up to about 100 feet, then jump off, curl into a ball, and drop into the skeletons to do bludgeoning damage to them. After all, he reasons, falling damage from that altitude would only be 10d6, but she'd cause 10d6 damage to any.
Wingardium Leviosa.
We had this long-running campaign and the DM tries to not affect storylines too much. He is amazing at description, but he likes to have the dice rolls and stats completely steer his creativity, as do most of us. We entered a situation he was obviously very excited about. It was a situation he created which was designed to get us overpowered by an army and each getting bags put over our heads, / knocked out. With the plan of waking up somewhere else. Well, our group made like 7 amazing dice rolls one after another and we somehow critically wounded the main antagonist and escaped. He admitted to us later he had to rewrite the campaign to introduce another antagonist who surprised us later. Good stuff.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Shot. It works. The wizard falls unconscious without a fight. The party then has to figure out what to do. The wizard won't stay unconscious for long. So they throw him out the window of the top floor of his own tower, onto the waiting spears of the cleric's skeleton army, who proceeds to savage the unconscious wizard, culminating in Sasha holding the dead wizard's head aloft as a trophy. In over a decade of playing D&D, nothing has come close to beating this tale. Evil campaign, the players are mostly Drow, investigating mysteries across the Underdark. One is an evil cleric. He realizes that he can command undead the first time the party encounters a group of skeletons very early in the game. He decides that it's really cool to have a skeleton army, and the rest of the party agrees. Anytime they find a weapon or armor the party doesn't want, they give it to one of the skeletons. Our cleric decides to name the captain of his skeleton army. He calls him Sasha. Several sessions later the party kicks in the door of a wizard's tower. They make it to the top of the tower and the wizard's sanctum. The rogue decides to try to sneak into the sanctum and scope out the room. He opens the door, and is unobserved. The rogue takes the opportunity to use his knockout poison to try and take out the wizard. He doesn't think it'll work, but it's worth a
Wingardium Leviosa.
Discuss it back and forth a bit, trying to negotiate something out, when Atodar has a revelation. Guys, I think she's Light's daughter. All of the details clicked into place. We just sort of sat there in stunned silence for a few minutes, then my brain went into overdrive. Okay, so I'm an illusion warlock. I'm excellent at running away. I can cast disguise self at will. We have a hat that can create a similar illusion that we'd recently acquired. If I make myself look like her, but with a hat, and she uses the hat to look like me, then I have Misty Step and invisibility and about 12 other escape spells, and then I hear Atodar calmly state, I jump onto the wizard. So he powerbombs the wizard. Rolls to hit. Natural 20. If I recall correctly, our GM rules that Atodar takes normal falling damage, but the wizard takes double that. Wizard is reduced to a bloody pulp. Just. She had reason to be impressed. But we still had no clue who she was other than the fact that she ran away for adventure and was scared of her dad finding out. 10 minutes later, we find ourselves fighting an ice wizard, across a river. Things are going pretty well, with us killing off his spirit wolf buddies, when our paladin, Atodar decides he's tired of the patshots and charges across the river to fight the wizard directly. Now, given how wide the river is, he only gets halfway through in his turn. It comes around to the wizard's turn, and he casts Shape Water on the entire river, freezes it to ice, then lifts it 200 feet in the air, with our paladin still on it. The wizard demands us to hand over the girl or he drops the river. Now at this point, we're still confused, because she's hidden in my cart and we have no clue who she is or how he knows she's here or why he wants her. So, a little bit of context. In this game, we were trying to stop a cult of puppet masters from resurrecting a shattered god, but we also find themselves embroiled in a conflict between two neighboring countries. Oldston, the one we came from, was full of holy paladins and fire magic and sun worshippers. It's ruled by Light, a holy paladin that's extremely devout to the point of being afraid of the dark. Rosen, the other one, which I technically came from myself but that's not important, has a bunch of arcane ice mages and moon worshippers, sorta. The moon had pretty much abandoned them at this point. Now, a few minutes ago, we had discovered a stowaway in our cart. She called herself Radia, and she'd run away to join us because we were cool. Now, this was right after my second favorite story form this campaign, where we entirely legitimately one-shotted a mummy lord at level 5, so
Wingardium Leviosa
no longer exists. But Atodar gets hurt pretty bad. Thing is, Atodar's a half-orc. And he hadn't used his racial ability yet that day. So our paladin just found himself lifted 200 feet into the air by strange sorceries, and his first instinct was to jump straight off Powerdiv, the guy that did it. And after all of that, he just stood right back up and kept going. That man is my hero.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My character died early on and our DM let me possess my dog to keep playing. I proceeded to play as a charismatic, albeit haunted, German Shepherd with a katana crudely duct-taped to it for the rest of the campaign.
Wingardium Leviosa.
How was it taped on? The side, perpendicular to the body. On the snoot. To the tail?
Wingardium Leviosa.
It was taped to the side, in a sheath, handle side pointing towards the dog's mouth so she could grab it to fight. To quote my DM, if we're really doing this, we're doing it DD's sneaking suit style.
Wingardium Leviosa.
What were her stats?
Wingardium Leviosa.
Probably full charisma, being a doggo and all.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Alas, foolish adventurers, you have fallen into my trap. There is no escape, and your death is now only a matter of time. You will suffer as you have made me suffice that a dog. She's so cute. Can I pet her? Or, such a good Geargar. And so died Baron Veilstroth, neck slashed by the goodest of girls.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Most of our first game, party of 6. Hired to take a cart and cargo across the wilderness to another town. 6 goblins emerge, 3 on each side of the road. Roll initiative. Our sorcerer rolls highest and goes first. Before anything he takes a hit on his spice pipe. Our DM let him smoke spice, crack or meth, not sure which, that would give him a random extra effect on spells cast. So he takes a hit and gains extra damage. Then he stands on the back of the cart to cast Firebolt. He rolled a 1. It hit the cart doing something like 8d8, at level 1, due to the spice effect, and incinerated both the cart and himself. It was the first combat roll of the game. /r/den green text and /r/gametales have more stories.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My group hired Fantasy Rasputin. Well, he was actually a bandit called Michael who we pressed into fighting for us. Over the course of around 4 sessions he got stabbed, shot, poisoned, set on fire, got his head half bit off by a Sharkman thing, and electrocuted. He finally perished when we sent him to scout a room where he walked straight into a giant slime and got dissolved. Oh yeah, and when we intimidated him into fighting for us, he shat himself.
Wingardium Leviosa.
For some reason we thought that if we removed the stake he would spring to life and attack us, so we prepared all of our spells and weapons, removed the stake and nothing. This is especially funny because I can't think of any in-character reason to remove the stake from a vampire that's already been defeated. Want treasure? Search his double-dead body. Fame and glory. Your characters could have just chopped his head off and burned his body without removing the stake and claimed you defeated him yourself, which you ended up doing anyway. The only reason for doing this is to max out the experience point gain for defeating him yourselves.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Girlfriend of the DM decided it was cool for her character to flirt with my character. DM is a good friend of mine, I'm not about that shit. Got to the point she messaged me after asking why I wouldn't, as well as why I wouldn't in real life. Promptly showed my friend, and worked it out that we killed off her character, and he subsequently ended their relationship in front of the group. He even got a by Felicia in there. Dice before dames.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I had a barbarian character that found a blood sacrifice crystal at one point. He took it and wanted to sell it later for booze money. We ended up getting kidnapped in the night after our watch fell asleep, and my character was about to be searched, so in an attempt to save this money maker, I made him shove it up his ass. Our DM face-bombed, rolled a d20 and immediately started laughing. My character was immediately vaporized as a demon materialized in my asshole. He rolled a 20, causing my ass to rip, pooling blood onto the stone and opening a portal to the demon void. Greatest death ever.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My barbarian had a pet chicken/lover named Bacon Sandwich. When Bacon Sandwich died, the whole party stopped the campaign to have a chicken funeral. I created Bacon Sandwich to piss off my DM. It worked.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Ha! I did the same thing with an ethereal giant goat, annoyed the whole party, and DM, so much they killed it several times. Good thing I could summon him back.
Wingardium Leviosa.
One of my party members had a pack goat. It kept biting and headbutting us when we tried to get it to do stuff or have our barbarian carry it up a ledge. Eventually it got killed, and we started using its body to check for traps. We later found an open flame, and cooked the goat in it. Then some sort of necromantic reanimating device reanimated the parts of it we hadn't eaten. We later went on to haul around a re-killed zombie to check for traps.
Wingardium Leviosa.
We were playing the early part of a campaign and our party enters a temple where a bunch of people are sitting around on their knees, not paying attention to us and chanting. The DM describes the room and says there is a big circle drawn on the floor. And then says, "What do you guys do?" I asked him what the circle is made of and he says, "Ash or something similar." I say those magic words. I break the circle with my foot. Complete silence for about 15 seconds and then the DM begins grabbing books and flipping pages. Ends the night early and says when we get together next time the whole campaign will be going in an entirely new direction. Yep. I broke the DM. Still hear that line "I break the circle with my foot" from time to time and makes me chuckle every time. One thing it taught me as a DM is you can never plan for every eventuality.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Asked to kick an undead king in the balls and rolled a 20. He was stunned for 2 turns while the entire party ganked him.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Undead. Balls. Seems like that wouldn't be very effective, since undead in most D20 systems are immune to both critical and non-lethal damage, not to mention stunning. And even flavor-wise they lack, you know, functioning organs. I guess that just speaks to the power of a nat 20.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My friend turned himself into a cat, and my other friend rolled to pet him. He rolled a 1, punched the cat in the face, and killed him.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Generally you shouldn't have to roll anything to pet a cat. It's not a skill, you just do it.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My DM asked if he wanted to roll for a really nice pet.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Also, that's not really how critical fails work. You would just do what you were attempting to do really poorly, not do something else entirely. He should have pet the cat so shittily that it was super uncomfortable, because what he was trying to do was pet it well. Failing to pet an animal resulting in punching it is like failing to make an attack in combat and the DM saying you swing your sword and it misses so much, it slices open his first aid kit perfectly so that bandages fall on his wounds and he heals HP.
Wingardium Leviosa.
The rogue in our party tried to hit on a bartender and failed, said he was going up to his room to jack off and go to bed. DM tells him to roll for masturbation and he gets a 1. Proceeds to jack it with a completely flaccid dick while sobbing uncontrollably while the other party member sleeping in the room is very aware of what's happening.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I have 2 stories from my first and only time playing. While we creating our player cards my friend wrote under skin type, no skin, just bones. I can't exactly remember what we were fighting but, my friend had gotten a whip a few minutes before. During the fight he rolled a 20 and ripped the monster's dick off with the whip.
Wingardium Leviosa.
We had just rolled up some random characters for a one-off adventure, and our characters met for the first time at a tavern. We hadn't met yet, so each person looked around the tavern and decided on what to do to build my character. I decided to head towards a group of dwarves, since everyone else elected to join the definitely not Russians in a drinking contest. The dwarves told me they were on their way to liberate their ancestral home from rat people who had forced them out. As my character ended up being a halfling with godlike charisma and agility, I regaled to them the story of The Hobbit, critical success. They got so into it, they invited me on an adventure that would have been straight out of Tolkien. Meanwhile, the rest of the party failed their drinking tests, and blacked out after a few rounds.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Outlandishly hilarious we succeed. So I roll my persuasion check, with +6, and somehow rolled a 20. Our DM literally face-palmed so hard that he couldn't talk for like 2 minutes while the rest of us sat there laughing to death. Finally though our DM decided it was just too crazy to let happen, can't blame him though. You're welcome, not mine. So many good stories, so many. Alright, so we went to go see the king and he wanted us to go see a duke, or count or something, of his that was trying to challenge him. So we finally made our way there and met the count, who turned out to be a vampire, and of course we had to end up killing him, and collecting his ashes. But while we were looking around his castle we stumbled upon his bedroom where in his bed lay a wooden dummy, so of course I stole it, and we went on our way. After defeating the vampire count we had to return to the king and tell him what happened. Guess what? Turns out he was also a vampire, so we had to kill him too. This is where it get bizarre. The High Chancellor walks in and is like, "Where's the king?" And I pull out the dummy and say, "Here he is." Now a little context: in our group whenever we need high rolls we end up failing, but whenever it's for something.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Player was playing a stone, or stoned as he would put it, sorcerer, and kept offering people enlightenment, weed, which whatever you do you. So he offered it to a shopkeep who unknowingly accepted it and rolled a fumble for a con save to withstand the effects, so he's stoned. The players succeed in figuring this out, so they start asking for stuff they can't afford and roll a crit success in persuasion. So they're now getting some free stuff and then sell a couple things for more than they're worth because they keep succeeding rolls and I keep failing rolls. It got to a point where I pretty much had to make up a reason for them to leave. Stoners, man, they'll fuck your game up, lol.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Kain rolled good, so he kicked his ass. We were supposed to cheat, but Kain just needs to hit really hard. TLDR, let me tell you something, nobody goes unless the 34 strength level 5 orc says they can go, so no go yo. Alright Redditors, there are high strength characters and then there's Kain the Barbarian. Kain was a full-blooded orc. At level 1 he had 20 strength. And Kain used two-handed weapons. Meaning he would hit almost anyone on anything but a critical fail and would hit like a truck. So with this in mind, what did Kain the Orc Barbarian do? Our first encounter was on a mini-boss bandit to get exposition. They were behind a weak wooden barrier. On the first round I somehow managed to get the initiative with my trash dexterity. So I charged through the wall, and hit the boss with a critical. The boss died before he could give any exposition. So we stumble our way into the first dungeon, a mine where magic gems were being stolen, and we're working our way through and against some peons, and then I roll a 1. We use a randomized crit fail wheel to determine what happens. I rolled hit your nearest
Wingardium Leviosa.
ally with a critical threat. The party leader was right next to my. The GM let the player survive simply because it would be kinda stupid, but basically said he'd let each person get 1 instance of plot armor. We reach the boss, kick the shit out of it, get a ton of gold. Then the party decides to cooperate with me to break Kain even further, and mind you, as a barbarian he can jack up his strength to 24 through his innate rage ability. We pool our gold together to buy Kain a +4 strength belt. Kain reaches level 2, and to sum up the party, it consists of the party leader Amagus, a frogman gunner, Kain's brother who is an elf who just hung around orcs for a while, and 2 magical anime girls, one edgy the other cheery. Kain also has armor that literally brings him back from the dead once per day, so literal plot armor. The frog has begun to just hang out on Kain's shoulder due to the size difference. Nothing particular interesting happens besides Kain just being too strong for his own good until the party heads into basically a hellish part of the world, where only monsters roam and magic doesn't work in parts of it. Guess what? Rage isn't magic, bitches. We enter the dungeon to go rescue some schmuck, and there's a boss gauntlet and then the real dungeon with a super monster running around that we have to avoid. Naturally we go through the boss gauntlet, and at the end there's a big fuck-off guy wielding a cannon. Kain also got a cool sword, but who cares, this guy has a cannon. So Kain kicks his ass, takes his cannon and just wields it when he's giant, or he could just use it to grab people with its X4 critical damage multiplier on an absurd amount damage already, and we have someone who can sleep people, edgy magic girl. So we go through the dungeon and we find a big fuck-off humanoid cat monster guy with claws who has Mr. MacGuffin locked up. Kain is about level 5 by this point. And we'd been in this dungeon for about a month. So I got the mage to enlarge Kain. So now Kain is also a big fuck-off guy with even more strength. About 30. 30 is literally the highest defined strength in the scale. A fire giant has 30 strength. So Kain charges at the boss, calling him out like a wrestler. Let me tell you something, I'm gonna mount your head on my wall even though I don't own any buildings. The boss manages to kill the leader because Kain didn't decide to do 2 extra damage that would have killed him because he's an idiot. But this rustles Kain and triggers a feat that gives him more strength. 2 more to be exact, so he has surpassed the scale. Kain kills the guy, but Mr. MacGuffin is comatose because he has no soul. We get the party leader revived. We eventually make our way to the main city to get another MacGuffin, but this time it's a box. And a sea serpent is attacking the bridge. Kane rolls a 1 and commits seppuku after he already gotten healed once from his armor. He gets revived. Unfortunately there's a big tournament going on to get said box. So Kane goes to the shop with his fuck off amount of gold and gets some new items including upgrading his +4 belt to a +6, and getting a ring with a little surprise. The party leader is up first and gets close to beating the boss who heals. Kane's surprise is a ring of enlarged person with a command phrase. And that command phrase is "let me tell you something." So Kane tells him that the only thing being ripped apart is him, and then the other guy also enlarges into basically a monster because apparently, he was some famous mercenary who was multiple levels higher than Kane but
Wingardium Leviosa.
not mine, I don't play, but a friend's. He and his friends were playing a kung fu setting using a D&D rulebook. They all set their class as monk. They were in a tavern and were gonna break out in a fight, but all 3 of the people in the fight kept rolling 1s, so the DM told it as them drunkenly bitch slapping each other in a horribly failed attempt at a kung fu battle.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Early on in a campaign, we encountered a huge, smoldering crater in the middle of a field with a portal to hell in the middle. A demon comes out and threatens to kill us if we don't give him our super awesome magical trident. I try to convince my group to just give it to him. I've already maxed out my charisma. Didn't work and they attacked. I convinced the demon after a few turns and 2 unconscious members of my party to just take the trident and go. He complies, but sends 2 demon dogs to keep us busy. After the demon was far away, I critically fail an eldritch blast, but I roll the highest damage. It passes the demon dog, flies a half-mile away and hits the demon. He comes back and murders us in 2 turns.
Wingardium Leviosa.
We did something similar. Our rogue snuck into Glass Staff's quarters from the secret entrance, and managed to pickpocket his actual Glass Staff, until he got caught trying to set up an ambush. He managed to convince Glass Staff that he was housekeeping, and began making the bed and tidying up. Then we rushed the room and killed him. The rogue proceeded to walk into that rec room with the red brands, with the Glass Staff in hand and proclaimed, "All right guys, there's been a reshuffling of our leadership. Glass Staff got promoted to Yarnbow and sent to headquarters, so I'm gonna be the new Glass Staff from now on. I'm going to need you to clear out and get back to work." And then the rest of the party ambushed them. Our DM is awesome. We're all playing D&D for the first time, and this is his first time DMing. So considering that, it's been awesome to see how he lets us be creative.
Wingardium Leviosa.
When it comes to talking our way out of situations.
Wingardium Leviosa.
NPC rolled to attack an NPC child, rolled critical miss. DM explained it as, "Fuck you kid. Fuck you mister." Enemy gets punched in the balls by the kid.
Wingardium Leviosa.
A buccaneer in our party went to swat a street urchin out of the way with the back of his hand as he walked down a back alley. DM makes him roll for it, guy rolls a nat 20. He dead. I don't remember if the paladin saw it or found out shortly after, but the buccaneer got dismissed from the party shortly after.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Playing Star Wars D20, essentially SWD&D, trying to escape from Vader himself, the party loads into a heavily damaged by functioning ship, we manage to get out of the docking bay and then I whiff on the roll to jump to hyperspace. I'll never forget the DM. Well, the engine made it to light speed, the rest of the ship however did not.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Our D&D group had a German DM, but since the rest of us were American we played in English. Generally no big deal, his English was great. One day we're getting to a good part in the story and he says you come upon a portal. We're all excited and discussing what to do, what could be on the other side, if it's dangerous, etc. DM looks confused. Guys, it's just a portal. It's nothing special. What? Of course it is. We're in the middle of a town and a fucking portal opens up. No, it's just like this. He draws a rectangle. The portal is a rectangle. No, like you have in your house. You mean a doorway?
Wingardium Leviosa.
You have treason cake, the inability for any bard to survive the dwarven elbow, and the backflipping Koizilla made of chloroform. Oh, and the time the party gave my paladin a cooking show, more or less, to distract her while they went to go interrogate a prisoner in ways she would not have approved of. One time we helped with a fish, not a magic fish or anything, just a standard, run-of-the-mill fish, plot a coup and take over his pond. We were hungry and our druid asked a fish if it knew of any big fish it didn't like that we could eat, and would it help us catch them. Fishy agreed instantly and lured the kingfish into our trap. We had fish and chips for dinner, and our fish friend is the new king of the pond. Another time my character, a human paladin, convinced a merchant who was not terribly ethical, he was stealing pseudo-dragon eggs from their families and selling them, that she was part dragon totally unintentionally. She just said that she was adopted, which is true, and that she considered the pseudo-dragon clan family, also true, and he'd best stop. Dude wet himself, our rogue stole his records and some other shit, and we left. Then there's the sorry we accursed.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Soon as you enter the room. My first time DMing, with players who also had very little knowledge of the game. One of the players said he was playing Brobar Thunderstruck, a dwarf barbarian. He claimed that Thunderstruck by AC/DC played every time he entered a room, to which I replied that that would result in disadvantage on stealth/sneak checks. Then he clarified that Thunderstruck wouldn't play out loud in the canon of the game, but instead would only happen in spirit. Like setting the mood. I conceded, and we began playing. The players went to pick up an ancient sword from the Queen of Glory's tomb, which had been taken over by goblins. The rest of the party decided to sneak past them, and all rolled fairly well. And then it was Brobar's turn. Who rolled a critical miss. So of course, with a large grin on my face, I said, "You try to sneak in." But Thunderstruck by AC/DC begins to play as
Wingardium Leviosa.
I was DMing my first campaign, and the party had just visited a farm, meeting the farmers and their 4-year-old son. The party was walking back to the village at night and heard footsteps behind them, and noticed the vague outline of someone following them. The party's fighter was super paranoid and didn't think twice about anything. She threw her trident straight towards the figure behind her, and it slumped to the ground. After inspecting the body, she realized that it was the farmer's young 4-year-old son. I laughed my ass off, and she wasn't happy at all. She stormed back to the farm and burned down their house. The campaign pretty much ended there, lol.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Player, I walk up to the door, rub it with my hand. Slowly, and say, "Babe, I know you'll open for me." DM, erases that area of the map, and redraws the door 5 feet further away. Form the player the door steps away from you.
Wingardium Leviosa.
That reminds me of a story I read somewhere. I spent the last hour looking for it but couldn't find it, that went roughly like this. DM, at the end of the room there's a door. Rogue, I check for traps. Fails roll? DM, you don't notice anything, looks like a normal door. Rogue, I lick the door. DM, the door licks you back. Roll initiative. Mimics are a gold mine.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I was able to convince my entire party to spend an entire fight doing only resting moves. The encounter ended when I powerbombed the last skeleton through a table. There was also the time during our first part of this campaign, the first campaign I was ever part of, that involved us fighting on the roof of a bar. I grappled 2 guys and convinced the DM to let me roll to choke slam them both off the roof. I rolled a 20, killed one, and crippled the other. We then dragged the crippled one with us for most of the session, periodically getting information out of him, until we paid off a Queen's Guard member to kill him and bury him outside the castle. Edit: I also dressed up one of my party members up as a dragon and fling him into the air. He then used flight and fireballs to rain down fire on the unsuspecting enemies. Then he landed in the middle of the battlefield and got beat to
Wingardium Leviosa.
death by all 4 remaining enemies. R.I.P. Ilburn, I'll always love you, my baby dragon.
Wingardium Leviosa.
We were about 12-ish and I was the DM. The party was attacked by a giant green slime. One of my friends asked me to describe it. It's like a giant booger monster chasing you guys. Without missing a beat, he says I use the last wish on my ring of wishes and wish for a giant finger to pick it. Yeah, I always read that in D&D there are no winners, but to this day I think Larry actually won a game of D&D that afternoon.
Hey guys, this is the Rogue YouTuber here. I recently had a big change in my life. I had a baby daughter. Here she is. If you could do me a favor and remember to hit the subscribe button and bang the bell, I'm hoping to really create a YouTube channel that really gets people excited and brings people the best, most interesting content collated from across the internet. I'm saving up to save my little girl to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science Department. So please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.